Hello, my friends, and welcome to Quartet. We're coming to you from Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, in the Appalachian Mountains, where we hold forth with the Arlington Institute, just down the road from Washington and Baltimore. And we're happy to have you with us today. I'm joined, as I always am, with a marvelous kind of group of friends and thinkers. Gregg Braden, how are you, my friend?
John, I am so good. It's great to have the band back together. I'm coming to you. It's a little chilly here in the high desert, New Mexico, and I'm happy to be with everyone today.
And Penny Kelly, how are you?
I am
Welcome back.
great.
Yeah.
Hope you all are too. Happy spring, almost.
And Frank Jacob, nice to have you with us from
Good to,
Germany.
good to be back, John. Good to see you. Good to see everyone down here in Bavaria holding the fort up against the Alps. My escape route is planned in case World War III breaks out, but I don't think it will. I'm being
No.
very, very optimistic in that regard.
So let's run around the table here and say what you've been thinking about, Frank. Let's start with you.
Well, I've been kind of keeping my eye on a couple of things. One of them is, this, well, I come from Canada, so once in a while I kind of, peer in to see, what the country might be up to because, we know there's been a switch over of power and they're calling a flash election now because they think they have high chances of winning. And so what do you see? And what catches my attention is not the election, because I know it's not who's elected, but more who's selected. It has to do with censorship. And again, we're seeing, just when everyone thought, we've learned all these lessons with censorship and sovereignty and freedom, they're clamping down and doubling down again. And the government is already getting in touch with all of the social media platforms and saying, you guys got to cover us here. We don't want anything nasty being said. So yeah, that's what I've been watching, and also I've been keeping my eye on kind of there's sort of a south of us here. There is a pretty active volcano situation going on in the Aegean Sea to the point where there's thousands of like volcanic eruptions taking place every day. So they're saying Santorini could go, the volcano could go. That went, and if that goes, it could be like another nuclear winter over here in Europe. And at the same time, you have to kind of give credibility to it because if you're watching anything to do with pole shift, which is another thing that I'm keeping my eye on, you're realizing that the magnetic North Pole has been shifting in an accelerated way now for a couple of years. And again, it's speeding up and speeding up. So everyone's sort of making prognoses now that this could mean another pole shift is on the horizon, but instead of being somewhere 100 years down the road, it might actually be now somewhere around 2030 to 2040. Imagine that.
Yeah, it's looming inbound. Penny, what's on your mind?
Oh my, I have a whole list. So I think one of the things on maybe the good side, maybe, it's the pyramid scans that are happening, what's happening underneath the pyramids. That has fascinated me, the structure. I had seen some of those intuitively, but not what they're saying. What I saw was like rooms and structures, but not these big supports. So we'll see about that. Um, what's on my mind personally? Mercury retrograde. Why? Why? And my boiler cracked and didn't blow up, but now I need a new boiler. So that's been on my mind big time. That's totally personal.
Great. What have you been thinking about?
Well, we're all thinking along the same lines. I think in general, what I've seen since we met 2 weeks ago is it's all about revealing secrets and the secrets that have been revealed in the last 2 weeks. The JFK files is a big deal to some people because it is officially revealing what has been suspected. Many people have thought was happening, but the role of the deep state, the role of the CIA, and the role of Kennedy's closest associates being part of his demise. It's also revealing just how long America has been broken on that level, how long the deep state has had been entrenched all the way back to the end of World War II, is what those files are showing. So it's fostering deep levels of deep distrust, even more than was already there. The pyramids, as a geologist, I've been following this very closely. We knew this was coming. I think what's important to know, all this stuff, I've had a couple of stations call me and ask me to comment. What's important to remember is there has been no official release of information. There was a 4-hour briefing to a closed audience that has not been made public. There was a portion of that briefing that was leaked, quote unquote, leaked. And the reasons that information isn't coming forward, there is something there. And part of the reason, it goes back to secrets. It also goes back to world religions. My friends in Egypt are reminding me that Egypt is a Muslim country. And in that tradition, our planet is only 6,000 years old. And what they're finding under Giza is going to wreck that date. And it's the last thing that they need right now with all the other complications going on. That's one thing. The second thing, if you look at the scans that came back from the satellite, and then you look at the interpretations, there is a lot of liberty that has been taken with those interpretations. There is definitely something underneath, immediately underneath the pyramids.
Yeah.
Now, what they're looking at as structures that go on for, a mile or so, very possibly can be geologic structures. It is unconsolidated limestone, fractured limestone, subject to a lot of faults. And we have to remember that these images are coming from a satellite, which that's not a bad thing. It's just not like, it's not immediately on the ground. So I think there is reason to be optimistic that there is something there. We're going to see some new structures, as far as whether it goes down a mile and stretches miles and things like that. I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm not reporting on it because I think there's a good chance that they're going to have to pull back some of what it is that's been found. So that has been on my mind. The other thing, within the last 24 hours, I thought this was a joke at first. King Charles has invited America to rejoin the Commonwealth to show solidarity between the special relationship in our two nations. And surprisingly, Trump just signaled that he's open to it. My sense is, number one, I think it'd be more symbolic. It could be an economic kind of union. But if you look at the big picture, the role that King Charles plays, the WEF, and the movement toward the merging of nations and the merging of economic systems, this could very possibly lay the foundation, the groundwork for that. So something in that direction. So a lot of other stuff, but those three things I've been really following the last couple of weeks.
Thank you, Gregg. So our subject today is about secrecy, and in the past we've talked about the kind of the basic issue that, some perspectives you can suggest that all of the major problems that are generated by humans on this planet are either a function of money or secrecy. And you can argue with that if you'd like, but certainly if in your list, no matter how long it is, you'd have to include those two things. And we spent some time talking about the fact that the future, as envisioned by Penny and others, there is no money. And so we talked about how do you get there? How does that work? And so on. And I thought today we'd talk about the whole issue of secrecy. Secrecy is a very interesting kind of issue here, because if you get to the place where there is no secrecy, that is to say, you have telepathy, humanity has emerged to the place where you've got large scale distributed kind of telepathy, where people can essentially read everybody else's minds, kind of like a blank sheet of paper, like a sheet of paper, I guess. Then suddenly you're into a space where, in theory at least, I don't know, maybe Penny's got some variations on this, but there would be no secrets, and uh, and by definition, the whole situation would have to operate really quite differently. And so what? So if we looked out into the future and said there's a potential place out there where we get to where there are no secrets, then the question becomes, so how might that happen? Is that a good idea? How does it affect other kinds of things? How do you get from here to there? Now, I want you to know that just this morning, this is idling in the back of my mind. I get this thing from Ed Griffin, who says, you got this problem with privacy. He said that you've got people in England or in the UK who are being thrown into jail for things that they tweeted, right? And they've been thrown in for like a year for something that they tweeted. And so what this raises is the question. It's not just secrecy, it's about privacy that is a companion component of this. And by the way, then government, because if you have complete transparency and there are no secrets, then, what's your relationship to the overarching kind of governmental system, to the extent that it exists, anything like we think about right now? And because, if they know everything about what you're doing, then do they have the power to respond? So anyway, that kind of lays the groundwork for all of this. And I thought, Penny, maybe we could start with you and say, what do you think about all that?
Oh my, yeah, a lot. But the first thing to understand about secrecy is that it exists because people want to avoid judgment, and we're not very loving. We don't make space for other people to be how they are. And why are we not very loving? We don't raise our people to be loving. Okay. So that's number one. Secrecy also, because we don't raise our children to be loving and cooperative, secrecy wants to have its own way. And so that's a problem. There's a level of selfishness that needs to be self-responsible and self-taking care of, self-centered, not being selfish, but centered in the self. And that doesn't happen. That gets distorted into honest to God selfishness. So that's a problem. The next thing I think we have to understand is that government is a symbol. How a group decides to govern themselves is a symbol of how they assume reality works and how they can then work that reality. So secrecy is a basic assumption in the third dimension. And that's, people don't even question it. I'm like, oh, wow. And very often the word sensitive is used to cover what I'm going to call a lot of the illegal or thoughtless, at the very least, thoughtless and sometimes extremely hurtful kind of behavior and activity. So, you'll hear the word, well, we have to have cover for sensitive government or sensitive financial stuff. What are they doing? Why are they needing to hide that? So just be aware of the similarity between sensitive and secretive. Secrecy is often a substitute for what I call, or what we call, a kind of skill in communication, and that's missing, and also a sense of timing. You can know something, but do you need to blurt it out in order to be the center of attention? Or do you need to just know that and make decisions appropriately? And then secrecy becomes, when So we're assuming here that we have some ability to know. We're not even to telepathy yet. So secrecy is a substitute for skills needed in communication and timing and an ability to work with other people. And then secrecy, of course, creates an imbalance. There's no balance between transparency and what needs to stay to the background. Sometimes things do need to stay to the background because of timing, but that doesn't mean they need to be unknown. So there's that whole balance thing. And then we come to what would the world look like? How would it be if we had no secrecy? Let's say we had telepathy. Well, when you're going to have telepathy, people have to get comfortable with being an open book. And people right now today, because everybody's so judgmental and kind of mean, there's a meanness that has permeated our entire culture. Telepathy requires a deliberately conscious attitude, like you're aware on purpose, with an underlying attitude or set of assumptions having an entirely different ethical base. So anyways, when you have telepathy, if you're going to have telepathy, you're going to have a whole set of manners, psychic manners included. You have to have discernment. You know, what's behind that? What's driving that? Why is he saying that? Why is she doing that? You have to have critical thinking and you have to have critical timing. So next, you have to have an openness to seeing the secrets of nature. I can't count how many people in the last 5 years have said, I don't want to know that. Don't tell me that. Don't talk like that. They don't want to know. And so that openness to the secrets has to be there. And that includes openness to plants, animals, how to use energy, the secrets of nature, the secrets of forces. When you are open to the secrets, you get this doorway or this window into hidden forces of nature that operate, that we can learn from. And we can see, oh, that's how that plant does that. That's how that animal does that. That's why that bird can fly. We've tapped, the secrets of the birds. We would have to trust. We would have to be willing to bear the truth and to bear witness to the truth. We would have to have some courage. And then lastly, I'll say, telepathy or the absence of secrecy only works when, and this is something that comes from other places that I've been, you see they don't have secrets and they don't use money. What are they doing? How are they making that work? When every single being, and they don't have children willy-nilly. We have children willy-nilly and we don't take care of, 90% of them. We don't raise them to fullness. We don't develop their incredible potential. And in other places, every single child is an absolute, utter gift. And that child comes in and is raised in such a way that they reach their potential every time. And so it changes. We move from third dimensional living to fourth dimensional living, which is kind of an interval, and then to fifth, which is, wow, compared to where we are now, it's a whole different kind of world. So I'll stop there.
It certainly would be. It would be dramatically different. What do you think
Yeah.
it would look like, Gregg?
John, as what typically happens in the question, you asked a number of different questions in that one question. So I'm going to begin with the first. Is there a need for some kind of secrecy? I think secrecy right now, it's based on the consciousness of a population. And it is based upon the need for secrecy because of the reality of inequities. So if you happen to have $1 million in your pocket and you're walking down the street in a poverty-stricken city, you don't want to broadcast that you have that $1 million in your pocket because you become a target because of that inequity. So I think this is a kind of a chicken and an egg thing. If we had no secrets, would the lack of the secrets create greater equity? Or if we created greater equity the other way around, would we then have less need for secrets? The role of telepathy, though, in this is interesting because telepathy means different things to different people, is what I've found. Telepathy is a form of deep intuition. It is also directly linked to empathy. And the issue with telepathy is that it is subject to the bias of the person that is telepathic, that is interpreting the signals that they are receiving. And the likelihood of an entire global population all developing that to the same degree at the same time, I think is on the trajectory you're on right now, I think is slim. For biological telepathy, okay, so our natural abilities. And the reason I'm making that emphasis, I just saw a really interesting and a little bit disturbing interview with Ray Kurzweil. Neil deGrasse Tyson did the interview. And what he was saying, and Ray Kurzweil, for our viewers that don't know, he's a futurist, he's a visionary, he's an author, but he also happens to be director of AI engineering at Google right now, a form of AI engineering. And he's saying by the year 2033 to 2035, which isn't that far off, that we will extend our neocortex from the biological brain inside of our skull to the cloud, and that by doing that, we will enhance our ability to solve problems on the one hand. The other hand, we will be sharing our thoughts. That's kind of a Borg concept. And he very casually, the way he does, he sits back in the chair and he goes, "Oh yeah, by the year 2023, we'll all be connected." And he's talking about the nanotechnology that is already inside of most of our bodies to some degree through the dust, the nano dust, and others more directly through medical interventions and things like that. So he's talking about us being connected in the cloud with our neocortex extended, which means our thoughts are shared. And that redefines what we call secrecy. And I think there's a very important distinction to be made. And this, again, is a direct factor in conscious evolution. When we elevate our consciousness to the level where we can tap and access and develop our telepathy to the degree we're talking about, I would assume that with that level of consciousness also comes what Penny called responsibility, or it would be a respect or an honoring for one another, not to invade one another's space. If I were consciously invading the ideas of the person across from me that didn't choose to share them, but if I wanted to actually invade that space telepathically to see what their thinking was, what would that be like? And there's again, this is a form of intuition, and it is separate from empathy. And I think if we had fewer secrets, it would drive our population toward these things, a more of an honoring, more of a respect, kindness, authenticity, because we would have the ability to do everything that we're talking about doing. So I'll stop there.
I took this kind of more in the different direction of like whether secrecy will be solved by telepathy. And so I got more into, I went deeper into that idea of telepathy and whether this is actually something, whether universal telepathic transparency is a logical or natural step in human evolution, or if it's even necessary. And, I actually no, I don't think that I think that humans are always going to prefer to have some form of anonymity because I think it's the basis of free will and personal accountability. So society needs honesty based on integrity, not transparency of every thought. So it's a consciousness thing, kind of like what you were saying, Craig. Like the level of society's consciousness has to rise kind of to a certain level for these things to kick in. And as you develop higher consciousness or you awaken, then your empathy will rise and you will feel what it's like to be lied to. So you would voluntarily refrain because you don't want to harm another person. And true evolution in consciousness shouldn't mean forced transparency. It should be a natural shift toward integrity because people feel the weight of their actions. And so I was thinking, well, where did this all come from anyway, this idea of telepathy, And I wonder if we all love the idea of this direct conversational form of telepathy because we've seen it romanticized in so many science fiction films and in so many novels. But how many people have actually thought about it in any great depth? And so I went a step further back and I looked at kind of where this may have come from. And I would say that a lot of this idea of the universal telepathy comes out of the New Age movement, which in itself draws upon a certain concept which goes back even further, which they call noosphere. So the noosphere is supposedly like the third phase in a succession of phases of the development of the Earth. So the first being inanimate matter and then biological life, and the next kind of disembodied fields of consciousness or whatever. It sort of falls into the Kurzweil thing with the transhumanist camp. So, and then you can't forget actually who developed that idea in the first place, because it was a French Jesuit by the name of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who formed this around his personal convictions, which were based on a purely Abrahamic religious concept around the idea of Christ consciousness, or he called it, I think, Christogenesis or something like that, and the image of a cosmic Christ, which sounds lofty, utopian, but what we're learning is like a lot of these religious ideologies based around messianic ideas are very much still caught in kind of a master race ideology, which is we're seeing kind of fall apart as more intel comes out about what it really means. In particular, it has to do with it's kind of effectively alienated us from the idea that we, the human family, has only our collective and organic psychospiritual selves to rely up to solve our problems, not some outside force or some white hats that are going to serve up true justice someday. And the longer we wait to realize this, the longer we'll see the advancement of transhumanism or the belief that only technocracy can save us. And the more we race towards some kind of a cataclysmic apocalyptic narrative, which might be like something written in the Bible. So Teilhard's concept, was that you'd have more and more complex social networks that are developed, and then the more of the noosphere would grow, and it would culminate in something which he called an omega point, where in the future, some point, there'd be this total spiral toward complete unification. Everything will be one consciously. Hooray, right? But, forget about what we talked about last time with diversity and richness of cultural originality based on a unique environment. For me, it's just another form of Klaus Schwab's Great Reset as far as I see it. I think Chardin was wrong. And he obviously missed, some of the stuff that came out after he left this planet, which emerged in the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi codices, which brought about, which introduced us to the not only the origins of his own belief system, but the primary source documents, which describe a complete different cosmology, which is based kind of on Mother Earth, Sophia, humanity that emerged from that, and is basically something that the Gnostic teachers describe being influenced by something called archons, which are deliberately deceiving and fooling us through simulation and manipulation. And the idea of this archons kind of explains why humanity struggles so much with integrity, if they are real, or whether they're just, entities or a metaphor for mind viruses. Then deception isn't just a human flaw, it's actually an engineered problem. So for me, any true evolution toward a higher consciousness must first include kind of a recognition of this deceptive influence and how it totally contaminates our current mainstream thinking, and the recognition of how it has pretty much influenced the foundation of human thinking for thousands of years, right? So our own thoughts themselves would first have to evolve to the point where they, basically where they above where they are now before we can even go live with them. Because I think, we talked, you guys have already hit on that. I mean, essentially, if we already have all these people thinking like that, I mean, it would be yeah, it would be hard to live in that kind of transparency. And if we removed kind of these distortion fields, it might make our abilities leaning toward telepathy more natural and clear. So this one-to-one thought reading or transmission, I don't think it's natural in an enlightened world. And Carl Jung even said shadow work is essential for human development. So if everyone's thoughts were out there in the open, could people still process their unconscious impulses in a healthy way, or would society like descend into total chaos? How would you find private space even to work out some problem you're mulling over? Guys like to go in their closet, as they say, men are from Mars and women are from Venus, right? Women need to leave them alone until they work it out, right? And it might be like standing naked on a busy street corner. Are you going to feel truly comfortable, right? So, what's wrong with cool clothing anyway that are designed to match your physical appearance, right? So, think about all the thousands of thoughts we have every day. Most of them are junk, self-deprecating, insecurities, totally negative. Our minds are like messy, nonstop radio stations constantly broadcasting this static, half-formed ideas out there, intrusive thoughts. So, imagine if you could pick all of that up. I think society would go insane, really. So having telepathy in this state of consciousness, I don't think it's realistic. It's just chaos, pure and simple. Maybe something like an advanced form of empathy or intuition rather than like an open book. So instead of mind reading, it would be more about sensing the vibration of truth or deception, something like highly intuitive people already, are claiming to pick up, where you can kind of feel if someone is lying, right? And maybe future humans would develop that ability more universally, where it would make deception, obsolete, not because it's impossible, but because it's energetically unbearable for us on this planet. That's kind of what I came up with.
Well, it seems to me that we're on the track to away from secrecy, if you will. More than the last numbers that I saw were that more than half of the information that's generated these days is classified. A number of sources have suggested, and so we're moving increasingly toward toward this Orwellian world of 1984, where everything a lot of the stuff is classified, coupled with the advancements in technology that allow this invasion of who you are and your minds and what your thoughts and certainly what your behavior is. Now, the thing that was that provoked this in my mind, Penny has suggested that in her visions of the future that there are places and groups and civilizations that operate without any secrecy. And you say, how in the world would that work? How might that how might that happen? What you need is, first of all, some kind of dramatic kind of event, probably, that keys a shift in people's perspective that is so fundamental that it changes their whole minds about everything that happens from then downstream. What are the incentives in a system where there are no secrets? What are the incentives? How do you encourage people to come up with new ideas and make the world better if the moment they come up with a new idea or soon afterwards, it's suddenly broadcast all over the place? I mean, so if you presume some kind of a mind shift that gets you into a different place, what you almost have, then you are presented with a series of problems. Like you could ask, I mean, how can any government work without secrecy? I mean, how does that work? Do we have to have government, or how does? Anyway, it raises lots of questions.
But I think the organic populations that I'm seeing, they are certainly empathetic, more empathetic, to the degree they cannot even engage with mainstream media news because what they see is so hurtful to their nervous system. It literally is painful to their nervous system. That is a form of deep empathy for others. I've had an idea for a book and I've had the title and I've written it and put it on an inbox in my office to get to in about 6 months. Then I go into Amazon, somebody else has already taken that title, they've already written the book because it was in the field. When we imagine, we anchored in the field. And if we don't act on it, somebody else out there is trying to do exactly the same thing. They're coming up with the same idea. And if we don't use it, they're going to use it. That's why I invite people when nature, the universe, nature, when it taps you on the shoulder with an idea, that means consciousness is calling that idea forward right now. And if you don't share what you have imagined or innovated or created, somebody else is going to.
I just want to make a comment to Frank, and then another comment regarding the whole question: can you have telepathy in a third dimensional realm, which is a realm in which you choose to go to because you want the gut-wrenching, gut-punching power of, oh crap, I shouldn't have done that, and now I have to live with that. The whole value of a 3D world is that you have to live with what you create. What does that do to you at the core level? That makes you aware of what you are creating. And it's a low level of awareness, but by God, it's an important one. And as you go up to other kinds of worlds, you have to be willing to go beyond a lot of the assumptions that we have in this world in order to embrace those other worlds. If you want a world that's more peaceful, one that is just as creative, just as interesting, you can go to a 4D world, even though there's a lot of misunderstanding about what 4D is or 5D, but you choose your world. And Frank, you had some good comments about things that I thought the things you were saying, those are natural for a 3D world. I don't know if we could still have a 3D world if we were all telepathic. I love this world. It is so messy. It is so fresh. It is so sassy. It doesn't make any sense sometimes. And what does that do? It challenges all of your staleness, all of your, come on, get real kinds of things. And I think that's of great value. I don't think we can choose to make this world telepathic, but I think we have to put that on the table, which you did beautifully, John, by bringing up this whole question and saying, what world do you really want to live in?
There's compelling evidence to suggest that the human heart is coupled to a field of energy and information that is not bound by the laws of classical physics and is beyond time and space. What that tells us is our three-dimensional existence also has the ability to have access to something beyond this three-dimensional existence through our heart. These are the sensory neurites in the human heart. They're available. We can choose to engage them or not. And when we do begin engaging them, it's very hard to go back, to unengage. Once you have done that, you think and feel differently. But that's an example of bringing a higher dimensional awareness into this 3D reality and then living the consequences of whatever that means.
I think it was Frank who said, I think this would be chaos. In some of those states of consciousness in which you know everything. And when I say everything, that means you could pick anything on your desk, a finger, a rubber finger, a battery, a piece of paper, whatever, and you would know the tree or the plant that came from and where that tree grew in the forest and what happened to that tree, who cut it down, who turned it into paper, who was working the machines that touched that paper. You would know everything about that. I've been in states of consciousness where you have unlimited consciousness. For those who are ready, willing, and able to choose to step up to a higher world, or let's not even use higher, that's too hierarchical, to a world that has a different set of ethical assumptions as their base. It lets them know, yep, those are real.
The nice thing about the human experiment is that we have this material realm which counts, right? I mean, how many of us have
Yes,
lost close ones, right? And like we just can't call them up anymore, right?
I know.
I know they're working on a cell phone and all these things, right? But it's not the
Yeah.
same quality of existence as the physical realm. And until we've found another one and proven it to exist, we have, but we have another gift, and that is the ability to go beyond just the body and into these, in what people call the field, right? That would be the non 3D realm. And we have hardware. I've researched it. I've put out films about it, and that connects us to this field. And some people are more practiced at accessing that and tapping into that than others. If we eliminate the stressors, like, there's a lot of people on this planet that don't have access to clean drinking water
I know.
every day. There's people that are still hungry every single day. There's people that don't have a plug that they can stick into a wall and hook their computer up to, let alone an internet. So, I mean, but these are not unsolvable problems. They're actually easy to solve. But there's this interference that is, stopping them from being available on an equitable basis to everybody. So we have a lot of stages still to go, I think, before we get to that less stressed society. And who knows what our society would be like if everyone's more chill, right? Because when you're stressed, right? Are you in a telepathic state and bringing the stuff in? And as I've done, not so much now, but in the past, composition and music, and I know that it only really flows. I think, Greg, you know something about that. When you get yourself out of the stressor mode, right? And then it comes in. So yeah, I mean, telepathy, I think all of us have it to a degree, but the society where that is kind of like unnatural or in some form or other is the next world, whatever you want to call it, the fifth
Yeah.
dimension, the second earth, or whatever. Anyway.
Yeah. I agree.
Well, thank you all very much. Very provocative and interesting conversation, and I appreciate it all. We're headed into a space that is really by definition strange, different, fundamentally different, and so it's important that we kind of work our way across some of these ideas, because it starts to uh, populate the landscape that's out in front of us about possibilities. And so I very much appreciate all of you coming together like this. And we very much appreciate all of our viewers who come to us from all over the world. It's surprising and really delightful to hear from people from, South Africa and Korea and all of the different places where you follow what we do. And so we appreciate that a lot. I need to remind you that Quartet comes to you from the Arlington Institute, which is a think tank that we put together over 35 years ago that's now resides in a little resort town of Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, about 100 miles from Washington and Baltimore. And our whole purpose is to help facilitate the transition to this new world. And we do that through a variety of programs, Transition Talks being one of them. You can find out about all the rest of them at arlingtoninstitute.org. And we'd encourage you to take a look and work your way and kind of explore our space. One of our programs is called Transition Talks, and it's a monthly speaker series where we host speakers from all over the world. As I've mentioned in passing, Robert Edward Grant was just here. David Martin will be here in April. May is somebody named Gregg, and June is Penny Kelly, and July, I think. Anyway, I remember. But we've got very interesting folks. Frank Jacob will even be with us in September. So thank you, and thank you for being with us. We do this every 2 weeks, and we'll look forward to having you with us next time. Thanks so much.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all. Love you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Love you. Take care.